You can see that when I chose this brush that does two different things, it's making skinny strokes and wider strokes. That's a perfect kind of tool to block in the foliage part, right? Because we want this kind of broken up rhythm. Your brain, when we're talking about rhythms, and I've talked about this in previous lessons, your brain is going to try to create something that feels unnatural by filling in areas that are spontaneous with areas that are orderly. Like your brain wants to create something orderly. If you go on autopilot and you're just drawing, it will make patterns. It will make things be symmetrical. It will make things be equal and even. And that doesn't happen in nature. And so let's get started with the demo. First, I'm using my small Sharpie, right? And it's at this stage, the pen is a little bit dried out. So it's almost like a pencil. I like it like that when I'm loosely blocking stuff out. But you can see my sketch is almost impossible to see what I'm even doing. I'm trying to show that right off the bat, you can see that where the roots are touching the ground, I want this to be extra gnarled, right? And in my little silhouette study that I just showed, you can see that it is meant to be a very, very twisted three-dimensional tree. If you go back and look at the reference, as I said, silhouettes are, this is something I learned in college, is that when you draw a silhouette, try to keep in mind that silhouettes can twist and turn in three-dimensional space too. So they're not just, obviously a silhouette is a flat graphic shape, but what you have in mind when you're drawing the silhouette is, hey, look, this thing twists and turns in three dimensions. So thinking about that, like you would in the anatomy of a person as you're doing figure drawing, which we'll get into in a later course, this is the way I think of organic objects too. So you can see that I'm trying to figure that out. I'm figuring out some of the twisting three-dimensional nature of the branches. I'm trying to show that the roots even come towards us, right? It's not just flat on a flat plane. The roots, they hit the ground and then they spider web outwards towards us, away from us in different directions, and have all these bumpy kind of knots and weird overlapping shapes on top of each other. In the reference, I found that to be interesting right off the bat. A quick side note, if every single tree in the swamp had that same look, like, well, Aaron, what if they're all bumpy, weird, twisty trees? Well, maybe one of them is slightly bigger. Maybe one of them slightly thicker. Maybe one of them is a little bit more reaching to the left, full, the branch twists out. Maybe this one has more hanging moss hanging from it, whatever. You want to give it something that the others don't have. That's one of the main things. So in this case, we're going to really try and focus on multiple different things. As you can see, this format, I either would have had to do a tiny little drawing, or I am going to, run out of room on the top. So I'm not going to be able to show the entire canopy of the tree, but it's kind of cool because I can show it kind of poking down into the frame. Now, going back to the first course where I did the skull demo, which is one of the first demos, think about this technique being translated to nature. It's the same exact thing. You draw in a rough shape with your line. I'm only using one value. This is a basics demo in which we are using the techniques that we learned in the very basics course, the first introductory course. And now we're leveling up a little bit, but we're drawing in shadow shapes. We're defining edges, right? But I'm only going to be using this one value. I'm not using a full value range. So you think light and shadow, the same as we saw in the skull. And what that means is you're allowed to put a little bit of extra, you can wait till the shadow dries and you can go back into it a little bit. And in this case, I'm using my blender brush, my water brush, to soften the edges where I think it got a little too harsh. Sometimes you can do that without blending it, but as you might have noticed right there, this is important for us to look at. Even I can't control the amount of ink coming out of this thing. Why is this brush deciding to let too much ink out and not let me feather my edges the way I would like? I don't know. This is what we deal with, right? Because it's not perfect. So I'm letting it go and then I'm blending the edges just a little bit so it's not like globbing up at the edges there. It's not the look that I want, and it won't look good when it's dry either. So one value, and I'm choosing to, instead of using a big thick brush, I'm choosing to use a small brush in which I can make some more aggressive strokes here and there, and just knowing what value that's going to dry. As you can see, the parts that I've done earlier are already drying, and we're ending up with this kind of light black value like we've used before. And so you can see that's my general goal here. And going back again, if you want to skip back and forth and look at the reference image, I'm really looking at where in that image I'm seeing light and shadow, and then I'm making some artistic license choices as well. So this is the part I can't really answer for you because that's what's unique to you. Where do you want to change what is there? That's what you're doing in the first line drawing phase. Then you're going in with the one value that you choose, and you're blocking in the darkest darks, right? Pretty much solid. And as you can see, I'm breaking the edges up with a little bit of a hatching technique. So that should be familiar to you from before. As we go through these courses, all the techniques that we covered in the very, very first course are the same ones I'm going to be using, but you'll see variations of those different techniques. Variations of a stippling or a hatching or a cross hatching or wet into wet, and all these different things that we've already explored. This is the method for breaking edges up when you're only allowed to do something with flat values. This is the method for breaking things up and not having to do, soften edges, not having to wait till or not wait till it dries, but go in immediately with a lighter value, blend that edge, soften it with your water brush or your mixer brush, if you will. Those are slightly higher level techniques than what we're doing here. Capturing light and shadow, don't underestimate it though. You can get quite a lot. I don't want you to think that this has to be a lower quality, image. If you really pay attention to the light and shadow, and I'm sure some of you will do better than I am here. I'm taking quite a bit of license, and it depends on the photo reference you're looking at too. You could do better than me in terms of finding one that spells it out in a way that you understand. I think I understand the reference pretty well when I pick it, right? I'm looking at it, I'm seeing opportunities for clear shadow areas, areas that are dark because of maybe their texture on the surface and not cast shadow. But ultimately, I wanted to move through it in that kind of way. And to get back to the process, the technique is, once you establish the area that is the light area, you don't touch that at all with your dark black value. You leave those areas alone. And then you come back in with a smaller black pen or something equivalent to that. And that is where you can add that texture that will sit in the light area that won't look overly heavy-handed or too aggressive or too eye-catching. And it'll just feel right. It'll just sit in there in the light areas. And you'll see again, I'll use some hatching, I'll use some other thinner brushes, or really this brush is quite thin, to be honest, but you always have that Sharpie, that thin Sharpie, where you can go in there and add a little bit of texture, a little bit of hatching, something that breaks up the edges, that, as I said, can build up the value a little bit, and so on and so forth. So try filling it up with the same value, or your mixture being close to the same value, but instead of using just the one brush, you could use two. So I think what you'll see is that it creates your eye picks up on this, even if it doesn't know it. As you can see, there's already this appealing variety to the brush strokes and the mark making. And that's just from holding it differently at a different angle, turning it in a different way, using it fast versus using it slow, using it with more ink on the bristle versus less. And that is a great idea. So you can see that when I chose this brush that does two different things, it's making skinny strokes and wider strokes. That's a perfect kind of tool to block in the foliage part, right? Because we want this kind of broken up rhythm. Your brain, when we're talking about rhythms, and I've talked about this in previous lessons, your brain is going to try to create something that feels unnatural by filling in areas that are spontaneous with areas that are orderly. Like your brain wants to create something orderly. If you go on autopilot and you're just drawing, it will make patterns. It will make things be symmetrical. It will make things be equal and even. And that doesn't happen in nature. There might be an underlying mathematics and a fractal nature to how everything is kind of laid out. And that's a conversation for, staring up at the stars and what does this all mean? But really, what it is finding a way to break those patterns that your brain is going to try to make. And we talk about this with just about everything. You talk about it with your brain will create tangents where they shouldn't be. Looking for tangents is a great way to practice this exercise. But in the case of nature, the texture of the bark, the types of branches, the repetition of certain shapes, your brain will subconsciously be fighting you the entire time. And part of the game that comes with becoming an expert at these types of techniques and subject matters is learning how to recognize that and not let it do that. So you can see here, I've got this kind of slightly lighter value, but really it's kind of the same value, just maybe not, the ink is not put on as thick, or I didn't just squeeze ink into it. So it's kind of running out halfway. And that's a perfect way to block in these large shapes for the foliage. And again, that's not to say that, this is how you have to do the foliage. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible for the students watching, is that I'm thinking of all this in graphic shapes. I'm not thinking of this in terms of rendering, right? I'm not rendering light coming through the leaves and beautiful spots of light. I'm staying pretty graphic, and I like to draw that way. I think it's fun. I think it's good for your brain. I think it makes you better at rendering. I think it makes you better at all different kinds of things. And now you can see I've gotten to the phase of really trying to identify with a smaller tipped brush. Again, difference in your mark making, diversity in your mark making. I'm refining and really sharpening up some edges here and there. I'm adding little tiny edge details that make something feel interesting. You really have to dig deep when you're not allowed to use a bunch of values and cheat with some flashy looking rendering or beautiful wet edges and things like that. You have to rely on your understanding of how to make one brush do a lot of different things, or one value do a lot of different things. So you can see the large flat areas have their purpose. The more textury, chattery, hatching like areas have their purpose. And then going back in and detailing things out where you want creates that scale and that difference in very different handling of the bark with its kind of movement and its directional skinny brushstrokes versus the tiny little baby sprouting leaves coming out in a few places that are just growing off of this branch that hasn't sprouted its new leaves yet, and it's just a curly, super thin little piece. And then comparing that to these more painterly, aggressive brushstrokes where you just blast it out a large dark area, turning the brush sideways and just dragging it across, letting the ink just make a more aggressive, or what looks like to the viewer, it's going to look haphazard, or it's going to look like, oh, he looks like he didn't even care when he made that brushstroke. But it's actually quite the opposite. You learn this when you study Sargent or Velasquez or Zorn, or the list goes on. But you look at it and you're like, what is that? You look really close and you see that looks like he's not even trying. And the reason for that is because they thought about it so much before putting the brushstroke down that they make the brushstroke, and it's almost like I can't fail, because I already thought about every bit of how I wanted that to work, what order I'm putting the brushstrokes down, what purpose it serves. Am I mashing down on the edge and cutting a hard edge that's going to be a cast shadow, or am I intending for it to be loose because I want it to blend in? I want that edge to be a little bit softer. Everything's intentional. And so I guess this is kind of a long way of saying you can do the same thing with your variety of mark making on a technique like this. You only get one value, but no one says that you only get one type of brushstroke. And look at how much energy you're able to get without any of the bells and whistles of all these different techniques. I'm not doing like any real fancy techniques here. I'm not doing any really minimal value control. And it was only because the way it was drying, too much ink was coming out and it just looked a little blobbish and not descript enough. I could go back in here and just render way more on top of it. But I wanted to show you all like going back to the comparable skull demo from before, right? This is more advanced because it's a more advanced course than that first course, but the technique is almost the same. Identify light, identify shadow, edges of light and shadow. Same conversation we had during that demo. Edges between light and shadow. Soft edge means form change. Hard edge means cast shadow or crisp, harder form change for lack of a better word. But usually it means cast shadow. So those things tell you a lot by edge control. And then last but not least, you go back in and then you create your stroke variety with smaller brush strokes that can focus the eye, that can give us more information, that can improve on the imperceived rendering of a form. And those are all the really important ingredients here.
Step outside and capture the beauty of nature with nothing but your sketchbook and pens. A few months ago, Aaron Limonick launched the first course in his ink sketching series, and we've been thrilled to see the incredible turnout from students around the world. Now he's back, this time with an entire course that focuses on the majestic power of natural scenes. Nature is endlessly complex, but Aaron will show you how to break down what you see into controlled and compelling compositions. You'll learn to identify and accentuate the true personality of natural objects, add texture with a few simple strokes of the pen, and build up detail while keeping everything in balanced harmony. This course is part of a whole series Aaron is creating. His first course, Ink Sketching Fundamentals, teaches you how to control your tools and utilize each major sketching technique. Later, in his architecture course, you'll analyze buildings, cityscapes, and interiors to capture the beauty of man-made complexity. Finally, with advanced techniques, you'll blend everything you've learned throughout the series into cohesive and powerful compositions. Each course includes full materials guides in which Aaron shows you exactly what pens, paper, and ink he recommends. From mountains and canyons to rivers, trees, and rolling hills, this course will cover everything you need to bring stunning natural scenes to the page. Sign up today and begin your journey at LearnSquared.com.